It's the week ending Saturday, the 8th of July, and this is The Week Unwrapped. In the past 7 days, we've seen Thames Water fined £3.3 million for discharging undiluted sewage into rivers, the world experiencing its hottest day on record with an average global temperature of over 17 degrees, and Meta attracting over 10 million sign-ups within 7 hours of launching its Twitter rival, Threads. You can read all you need to know about everything that matters in the Week magazine, but we're here to bring you some stories that passed under the radar this week. Big news, not making headlines right now, but with repercussions for all our lives. I'm Olly Mann. Let's unwrap the week. And joining me today from the Week's digital team is Julia O'Driscoll from BBC Sport. It's Emma Smith, and it's the return of our man in China / Hong Kong / Turkey / Syria by way of the UK, Abdulwahab Tahhan. Abdul, you're up first. What do you think this week should be remembered for?
Is war memorabilia a grave affair?
War is good business for parts of the economy, historically. It doesn't mean the defense contractors cynically want it. I know a lot of people in these companies, and they're as heartbroken by the war in Ukraine as the next person. But yes, war is good business for certain parts of the economy.
Michael O'Hanlon from the Brookings Institution speaking to CNN last year. Abdul, war is good business, it seems, for a few individuals online anyway.
Indeed, Ollie. This week I was reading on New Lines magazine an article published on Monday about war memorabilia in Ukraine and the business that is flourishing there. Essentially, a couple of people found out that they can sell a lot of war trophies and war booties to a lot of people in United States, France, and Australia. And these things vary from trousers to uniforms, insignia, baseball hat, even to underwear. Well, it doesn't say if it's worn or not worn, but pictures are attached anyway.
This is memorabilia, if you can call it that, when you're dealing with a current war, that's been used by Russian soldiers captured or presumably killed in Ukraine.
Some of them are by captured, some of them by killed people. What is unique about this is that it's kind of, you can track it in real time. A lot of stuff are being sold after filming them. So you would see them in a video. Some of the items are attached with the video. So that you can see them, you can see the date, you can see kind of the location and the stuff. And if you order it after a couple of days, you can get them.
And what kind of money are you talking about?
There's a range of stuff from the posts I've seen on eBay and other places. You can see them on Facebook or even Instagram. A baseball cap could sell for like over $200. A uniform is over $300. Trousers, not including shipment.
Emma, were you surprised by this? Because I know there are collectors of war memorabilia, particularly in the United States. It's maybe not a surprise that some of this would be traded on the deep web. But as Abdul was saying, this is openly being flouted on Instagram, on Reddit.
Which I was surprised about before I read this article as well that Abdul shared. It was sort of an aspect of the Russia-Ukraine war which sort of passed under the radar. But the fact is that it seems to very much be part of the sort of like mainstream Ukrainian sort of resistance, as it were. For example, items from battlefield that are being sold are being collected by the official Ukrainian postal service, and as you say, being sold via mainstream social media sites. I think it's an example of how in war times what might be considered sort of morally ambiguous decisions are absolutely sort of, that moral ambiguity goes out the window because these people are literally living in war zones. And so, from a selling point of view, anything that sort of provides income and support for them is okay. And in the end, those buying it, obviously there's a sort of the moral question about buying, uniforms that someone is probably been shot dead in.
Yeah. And which are emblazoned, of course, with the Russian military insignia, with the Z. So you're kind of, from an American's perspective, you're buying the gear of the bad guys, right? So it's not just a trophy. Look at who we captured. There's an element of glamorizing it too.
Yes, which is obviously slightly, so there is certainly a definite sort of questionable morals from those buying it, but I think from the side of those selling it, you can't really sort of have those quibbles if you're trying to scrape together some kind of income while you're literally living in a war zone.
Julia, do you think there is a distinction between the morals of buying something from World War II or, I don't know, the Napoleonic Wars or whatever, and something that's happening in real time now?
It's a really good question. I think it's really tricky to say. I think what's really interesting in this case is how the funds are being used. So lots of the middlemen who are trading these goods online are then funneling the funds that they take back into the specific units or back to the soldiers who helped to collect it in the first place. So in that case, I think in the article that Abdul shared, it was described as this really quite crucial fundraising system now. So in that way, the moral implication is perhaps there's more reason to do it than perhaps for World War memorabilia that has been around for decades and it is just profiting the individual who has bought it and traded it on.
I mean, that in itself shows what a desperate situation some Ukrainians are in, Abdul. If a few $100s for a T-shirt makes a significant difference to their defense effort, I mean, you'd like to think that they were better equipped than that.
Well, if you look at the economy, war is a good business for people who are selling weapons and things that are war related. But war is not good business for people living on a daily basis, for people who have a grocery shop or fruit shop or people working in the city. Millions of people lost their jobs as an effect of the war when the war started. One of the guys I read in an article elsewhere, he had a grocery shop in Kiev and he lost more than 50% of his income. And he had to shut down his business. So, and then he found out there's another revenue, another place where he can get money, and it's by collecting and selling these items. And so it is good for them to get some money to get back on their feet. So war is not a good business for everyone involved, especially if war is happening in your city. But if you can find something to get some money out of it in order to keep going and live, then why not?
There's also the question of respect, I suppose, to the dead, isn't there, Emma?
Yes, I suppose it's easy for us to say that on a podcast here in the UK/Hong Kong, whereas those in a war zone in Ukraine will have a very different perspective on things. It was interesting sort of reading about, what international humanitarian law is on sort of war booty, just as sort of like an official side of things. Hague Convention of 1907 says private property cannot be confiscated, but military equipment and other items belong to an enemy force in combat can be captured and then used by the victorious force. And, if you're selling something, you could say that you're using it. That's the use, it's to be sold. So there is sort of like a humanitarian loophole in terms of the official sort of stance on this. Yeah, I've got to be honest, sort of like reading this story, I didn't have a huge amount of sort of like qualms about the Ukrainian people doing this, because in war, as I've said before, morals of peacetime generally go out the window.
But what about for the Americans buying it, Julia? I mean, are they buying it as an investment? Are they buying it to support Ukraine? Or is it just that contingent of people who like military stuff and it's a cool thing to show off to their friends?
Yeah, I guess it probably is a mixture of combinations, and particularly for collectors who it's a very avid hobby. I can see why this new trade would really appeal. I did see one Russian who was speaking from America say that it's sort of the equivalent of selling memorabilia collected from US soldiers in Afghanistan to the Taliban. That's a very extreme comparison, but it does raise some really interesting questions. And I also saw an article a few months ago that was calling out Russian trade in Ukrainian memorabilia and saying that's an incredibly sick thing to do. So there's just so many layers to this. It's incredibly complex and multifaceted, and it would be hard to kind of draw a general trend, I think, in terms of what motivates individual collectors.
Abdul, are you aware of anything similar happening where you're from in Syria?
In Syria, no, we did not have. I don't think we attract people from the United States who want to collect this. For Middle East wars like Yemen or in Syria, you wouldn't see a lot of things people do for Ukrainians. For example, I didn't see any groups going to Syria or to Yemen to save the animals, but you've seen a couple of these groups going to Ukraine. So I think by the same virtue, a lot of people are not really interested in the war in Syria or Yemen, but they're interested because it's Europe and it's Russia, so it's totally different.
Is it a good investment, by the way, Julia? I mean, long term, how much are items from previous wars worth now if you do get your hands on some?
Yeah, so generally, when I was reading around this, it seems that there's fairly low odds of war memorabilia having a high value, particularly for more recent conflicts. So looking around memorabilia from the Gulf War and Iraq, items like uniforms or medals were going on eBay for very low amounts, 20, 30, 40 pounds. But then there are obviously some items that have gained more value over time, particularly around World War II. I was reading that a Nazi paratrooper helmet could be sold for as much as £15,000. But the most expensive one that I saw was a Victoria Cross. So obviously an incredibly rare medal, 1,358 have ever been awarded. And in the 1990s, one sold for £130,000. And it's estimated that would now fetch around £500,000. So I think it would really depend on what you're buying. I'm not sure that a uniform would necessarily ever gain that much value, though.
And as a Syrian, Abdul, I'm just curious, how would you feel about it? If you came to my house and I had hanging up in my sitting room a T-shirt from a Wagner mercenary. And I was like, I've done this because I'm supporting the people of Ukraine. How would you feel about that?
If you were actually fighting in Ukraine and you got that from them, I would consider you a hero and I would buy you a beer. But if you just bought it off the internet, I would consider you a coward because you did not have the balls to go there and fight yourself. And a lot of people in the United States, or think of France or Australia or whatever, they claim, yes, we're donating this money to help whatever. But they don't really take into consideration the risk of collecting these items and what happens to the people who collect them. They just buy them to feel better that, yes, they collected something, and they don't have the courage to go actually and support a cause that they believe is at the core of our liberty and freedom. So if you're just buying it to show off, you're such a coward. If you go there and collect it by yourself, you're a hero.
Julia, you're up next after this. Okay, Julia, your turn. What do you think this week should be remembered for?
This week, Amsterdammers are saying no to putting out the city's red light.
If there's one way to describe Amsterdam's relationship with the red light district, it's complicated. Why? Because several very diverse worlds come together there. First of all, it's home to the adult industry. Secondly, it's our oldest district. So actually, our oldest monument, the old church, is in the middle of the district. Thirdly, we live there. And I don't mean students who want to party all the time. No, I also mean couples, elderly people, and families.
Vloggers Who is Amsterdam and their video A Guide to Amsterdam's Red Light District published last year. You can watch the whole thing on YouTube. Julia, what's the story?
So for some years, Amsterdam's Mayor Femke Halsema has been considering and drawing up proposals to move the city's central red light district, the Valen district. And she's faced opposition for a long time over this, but it's really ramped up this week as she's facing what has been described as a monster coalition of Amsterdam locals who are going to plaster the city in posters through the summer and draw attention to why they think the proposals should not go ahead.
Okay, and what do you mean by move the red light district?
So the proposal that Halsema has settled on, there have been various different scenarios considered, but the one that is going ahead at the moment is to close 100 of the Valen district's 249 red lit brothel windows and move 100 rooms into a custom-built erotic centre in a different part of the city. So there would still be some rooms remaining in the Valen district, but it would be creating this.
So you'd end up with 2 red light districts instead of 1. It's the plan.
Well, there are actually, when I was reading about this, there are 2 other much smaller districts as well. But the point being that because obviously Valen is the oldest part of the city, as we were hearing, it's very central, it's the one that everyone knows about. That's really where the problems that Halsema's trying to combat arise.
Okay. And this coalition that you describe who are up in arms about it, what are they objecting to in particular?
So it's a very broad group of different people who have oppositions to it. It includes sex workers, property developers, locals. And so they have competing reasons for why they are against the measure. Sex workers say that they feel they will potentially be less safe in this area, that they could lose trade. Property developers potentially don't want this new erotic centre to be built near to places where they have projects underway, and locals have a variety of different reasons, but again, there's a slightly what Halsema has called NIMBY attitude to building this centre in a different neighbourhood.
Yeah, so Emma, you can understand, can't you, why people who lived previously in an unremarkable area of Amsterdam might object to suddenly building a massive erotic hotel and business centre where they live. But for everyone else, in terms of why you might want to move the red light district at all, never mind where you're moving it to, I've been reading around this as well, and I've seen that during COVID, a lot of Amsterdam residents were saying that they really felt like they had their city back from kind of loutish stag doos that were parading around in the red light district, getting drunk, puking in people's post boxes and all the rest of it. And actually, that seems to be the motivation behind people saying, can we do something about the red light district, which is understandable.
Definitely, yeah. So the plan's described as a mega brothel in certain tabloid newspapers, which made me chuckle. But yeah, you can understand to an extent why the mega brothel or erotic centre might be a reasonable idea, because the fact is that Amsterdam and the red light district, like you say, it has become a magnet for stag doos, tourists, on holiday, and therefore sort of end up causing trouble, drunkenness or whatever. And Amsterdam have introduced rules this year, new laws to try and clamp down on that. In February, Amsterdam announced it's making it illegal. It was illegal to smoke cannabis on the street in the red light district. Also, bar and restaurant opening hours were limited. So there have been plans, put in place recently to combat antisocial behaviour in the red light district. But obviously, Femke Halsema has these sort of, reading up on it, it seems like a bit of a passion project for her to, bring in this erotic centre to really clean up the red light district, and she seems very set on it, despite the opposition.
Were you surprised to see this, Abdul? I mean, it is one of the things, isn't it, that Amsterdam is known for. You ask people, why do you go to Amsterdam? And it's kind of Rembrandt, the Anne Frank Museum, and this, isn't it, really? That's basically it.
I was not surprised at all by the news about moving it, because it's about time. The population of Amsterdam is 900,000, and reportedly you get 20 million tourists visiting Amsterdam every year, and that's projected to be 30 million tourists every year in 2030. So I was not really at all surprised. It's about time. If you look at other countries, they all move away certain things. Like Cairo is now building a new administrative city 35 kilometers to the east of Cairo to move the congestions. So you need to create some areas for the people living. And as you said at the beginning, people during COVID felt like they got back their city. To be honest with you, I feel really bad for people living in a touristic area because of the behavior. And Amsterdam particularly, I think, launched a campaign a couple of months ago to deter British people aged 18 to 35 from coming. And the slogan of the campaign was "Stay Away," showing British people young being arrested and spending the night in jail instead of having a nice night out, in order to deter them from visiting and making a scene.
But the whole philosophy, Julia, of having sex workers kind of out in the open at all and legalizing prostitution is to say that sex work is work and their rights are as relevant as any other worker. So don't get me wrong, I appreciate there are issues around slavery and people being imported against their will and all of that stuff as well. But in principle, the idea is we're here and we're workers. If you put them off into some sort of industrial estate round the corner, you can understand why sex workers might say, well, no, that's stigmatizing us again.
Yeah, absolutely. Halsema said that to have these like groups of people going past and taking photos of women while they're working in their windows is a violation of their rights. But then sex workers say that they feel they're being scapegoated for issues in the area that are just beyond their control, and also that moving the district could put them in a much less safe situation. One of the benefits of having crowds and so many people, although it might deter some trade, means that there are always people around, and the police are also incredibly close, and there are concerns that the police could be spread even thinner. It could make much harder to control. And also, one other difference is that people will be able to rent rooms in the new centre by the hour, so they wouldn't necessarily have a permanent base there, which means that some sex workers could be carrying their income to and from this area with them, making them even more vulnerable. So it does just raise so many complex questions.
And it should be said that, the plans have had a opposition from a range of groups, a range of sort of people from different backgrounds, not just sex workers, residents associations, Jewish organisations in Amsterdam, property developers, obviously
And the European Medicine Association, did you see this?
I did see this, and this did strike me as a bit NIMBY-ish, to be honest. So the plan for the new erotic centre, red light district, whatever you want to call it, is very near the post-Brexit headquarters of the European Medicines Agency, which has left the European Medicines Agency, the EMA, rather cross. Their statement in March, locating the erotic centre in close proximity to the EMA's building is likely to bring the same negative impacts in the adjacent area. Because the fact is that wherever you move the red light district, if you move it, people are going to, those living in the area that you moved it to are probably going to be less than impressed, because if you've chosen to live near the Amsterdam red light district, that's fine. If you've chosen to live away from it and then it suddenly gets moved closer to you, you can see why that would be something that you might want to complain about.
It's another consequence of Brexit, unforeseen. I mean, for the kind of liberal project, Abdul, do you think this sends a bad signal to the world to the extent that it has been noticed internationally? Because, it's saying, well, we have a city where we've decriminalised cannabis and sex work, and there are issues around that. It's not like we did that and then everything's fine. There are issues that we're still dealing with.
There are issues they're dealing with, but they're dealing with it professionally. I mean, it's nonsensical to think of the universe as a static place where things don't change and grow. They're just moving the place to another place to create other areas. They're not criminalizing sex work. They're not criminalizing drugs. I think they're just bad at enforcing the rules. That's what they're doing. Because one of the sex workers in a couple of articles I've read, that they said, yes, we have these rules about banning people smoking cannabis, but no one is enforcing them.
And also, it should be said, I think, Julia, that the plans that Halsem has mentioned kind of reference Baz Luhrmann's Moulin Rouge as an aesthetic anchor. So it is arguably not a case of stigmatizing it, but celebrating it and saying, actually, the red light district is pretty grubby. And what we want to do is build a place that's more of a celebration of people expressing their sexual freedom in Amsterdam.
Yeah, absolutely. I think she is really committed to protecting and empowering sex workers. And she said that she wants to bring a certain level of class to the erotic centre. And it's worth saying as well that this centre will also have a hotel. It will have cinemas, clubs, restaurants, bars. She wants it to become
We'll have a giant elephant. Everyone will be singing Nirvana.
She wants it to become a destination in itself. So I think there's opportunity there. And compared to some of the other scenarios that were debated kind of early on, included that people could continue operating in the Valand district, but would need to close the curtains on their windows, which sex workers said would just be a nightmare, or closing all the rooms, or making it so that people would have to pay to access the area, which in some ways makes it even more of a tourist attraction, really. So it'll be interesting to see how it plays out in the coming months, but I think there will be a lot of rumbling opposition to come.
Yeah, I mean, interesting to see, but it strikes me not that difficult to predict. They're not going to get this thing built, are they? There's too much opposition. They're taking down one of the historic things of Amsterdam. That won't fly.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, I don't think so. And also, she said that they need a commercial partner to make it happen, and I don't think they've got one on board
Probably
yet,
not sponsors queuing up to associate themselves with that particular product yet. Okay, Emma, you're up next after this. Okay, Emma, you're finishing the show. What do you think this week should be remembered for?
Come on, Barbie, let's go cause political controversy in Southeast Asia.
Hey, Barbie. Can I come to your house tonight?
Sure. I don't have anything big planned, just a giant blowout party with all the Barbies and planned choreography and a bespoke song. You should stop by.
So cool.
I am excited. I can't help myself. Barbie, released from Warner Brothers on the 21st of July. So much pink in that trailer. But Emma, the story is not that the film's coming out, but that the film isn't coming out in some places.
Yes, it's not coming out in Vietnam because this week authorities in that country have banned commercial screenings of Barbie because the film contains a map with the 9-dash line.
Okay. So much to discuss. What is the 9-dash line and why do Vietnam care about it? And then we'll get on to what's the relevance to Barbie. What is the 9-dash line?
So the 9-dash line is a representation on some maps, Chinese maps, of China's territorial claims in the South China Sea. So basically, it provides sort of a dashed line into the South China Sea with what China basically claims is its borders in the area. It encapsulates a series of disputed islands, such as the Spratleys and Paracels, and it comes within very close to the land borders of several Southeast Asian countries, including Vietnam. And so the 9-dash line is a very sort of touchy subject in the area, and Vietnam says that, those claims violate its sovereignty, and so a Hollywood film which contains a map with the 9-dash line on it, sort of, legitimizing it, is something that has not gone down well in Vietnam.
Okay, so I understand why it's a sensitive issue in Vietnam. Do you think this could possibly have been in the minds of the producers of the Barbie movie?
Well, it's hard to say. I mean, obviously, it could be a entirely innocent mistake, but the fact is that Hollywood relies a lot on Chinese audiences and Chinese money, so there is a chance that
the insinuation is they're courting China, are they? With this?
Yes, and the fact is that I don't think it's too much of a stretch. I don't think it's too tinfoil hat to say that because so much of Hollywood's sort of they make a lot of money from Chinese audiences. The Chinese box office is big for a lot of Hollywood films, and so anything that gets in China to ensure that the film is going to be widely shown in China would be a positive for Warner Brothers. But obviously, it's upset the Vietnamese.
Okay. I mean, Julia, I have done some digging just on Twitter to see what this looks like in context. And obviously, I haven't seen the film because no one's seen the film. But what people have done, eagle-eyed viewers of one of the trailers, they've sort of done a freeze frame of the shot that they think is the one that caused the controversy. And without going into detail of the plot of the Barbie movie, basically it's about Barbie the toy leaving Barbie land and going to the, quote, real world. So there's an obviously comical scene where Barbie and Ken are looking at a cartoonish map of the world like it's been drawn by a child, talking about the real world. I mean, it's obviously cartoonish and ridiculous. Like, America is sort of gigantic on it. I can't see Britain or any of Europe on it. Africa's in the wrong place. It's in that context that there is a line, and it's not even 9 dashes, by the way, it's 8. So it's obviously a sort of cartoonish representation of what a toy might think the world looked like. In that context, if that's right, like I said, I haven't seen the film, but in that context, this is an absurd overreaction, isn't it?
I don't think so. Also, fantastic analysis, Ollie.
Yeah.
Gold stars.
Sure. You don't think so? You don't think it's an overreaction?
No, I don't actually. When you're explaining it, and I was just having a quick look, I hadn't seen the map before, but it seems even more of a deliberate inclusion. When I first read it, I thought, oh, wow, someone has really overlooked something here. And then reading around it, I came to a very different conclusion. And I think that given the way that the map is drawn, it could have been easily left out. There's no...
Oh, I agree.
I
agree with that.
Yeah, totally.
Okay, so I suppose I'm willing to say that they put it there innocently. And I think it looks a bit like sort of plane tracks or train tracks like you get on a cartoonish map like in Indiana Jones. But you think no? No,
and I think so much attention to detail has been paid on this film. Like, we have spoken so much about Margot Robbie's feet just from a 3-second clip. There is no way that every detail in this film has not been thought about, as far as I'm concerned.
When it comes to whether Western studios should be considering international political sensitivities at all, Abdul, of course, that secondary market is massive. And I mean, you know better than anyone on the panel how important China is to an American studio. But this is a film about Barbie. It's a film about a heroine of consumerism. It's filmed in Britain. It's being released by an American studio. Shouldn't their primary market be the Western world? And then other countries can come to a view about whether they want to show it or not. And there shouldn't be so much hand-wringing about this kind of thing.
It's all about market and demand, where the demand is. How many tickets are they going to sell in China and around the world? So all these factor. And sometimes producers get it wrong, sometimes get it right. We don't really know what data they get, what data they have about this issue in particular. But I don't think it was a mistake. It was a deliberate move, I think, and calculated. I don't think it was just like a slip of an artist or it was in a wrong frame for some reason. China is a huge market, and a lot of countries do this. A lot of countries ban a lot of films. It's not a new thing. If you look at the latest one, I think a couple of years ago, 2014, I think, or 15, where decided not to release the interview about North Korea for some reasons about they got threats if they release it. But this is not a new thing. For example, in 1999, Saddam Hussein in Iraq banned South Park Bigger, Longer, and Uncut because it depicts him as being Satan's gay lover.
I mean, fair enough from his point of view, though, right? I mean, both of the instances you've given are pretty on-the-nose satires of didactic regimes. This is a bit different.
It is different, but it hits a nerve. It hits an issue. There's a chip on their shoulder. Vietnam has a chip, I think, on their shoulders about their territories and what belongs to them and does not belong to them. This is one of the buttons you can, I think, press to annoy people or to alienate people, and they got it.
I mean, what's interesting, Emma, is that it's become, I mean, obviously we're covering it on this show because it's not part of major online discourse, but it's become known publicly at all. You'd kind of think at the stage at which the Vietnamese censorship board had noticed this, Warner Brothers could have said, oh, we'll just remove that frame from the film. It's not that important. It wouldn't cost them that much to do compared to the amount of money they could take by releasing the film in Vietnam. That is interesting, isn't it, that they haven't responded in that way?
Yeah, I think, again, it's an indication of the influence of the Chinese market on Hollywood films because, I mean, this isn't the first time that Vietnam have banned Hollywood films because of the inclusion of the 9-dash line. The animated film Abominable was banned in 2019 for having a map with the 9-dash line on it. Uncharted, the movie based off the PlayStation video game with Tom Holland and Mark Wahlberg, was banned in 2020 for the same reason. Yes, you are right in that it would have been possible for Warner Brothers to edit the film to remove the 9-dash line, but I think that from their perspective, they don't want to then be seen to be doing what would be construed in China as being sort of an anti-Chinese edit. I mean, the 9-dash line is it's not recognised outside of China. In 2016, a UN disputes resolution tribunal ruled against the validity of the 9-dash line, but China has never recognised that decision. So I think that if a Hollywood film was then to be edited to remove, the 9-dash line, China would take it very badly.
But I suppose the thing that I just feel instinctively, Julia, I'm sorry to return to this because it's interesting that all three of you seem to think that it was done deliberately on some level, and I don't. I just feel like, this is a product to sell more plastic dolls for Mattel. It's about entertaining little girls and grown-ups who are nostalgic and sort of, have campy fun with the idea of Barbie. It's a pure play for entertainment. Would they really knowingly have wandered into a political hot potato with Barbie?
Yes, I think so. Because also reading around it, there are some really fascinating long reads on how influential China is over Hollywood and filmmaking, and even saying that, a film can be a box office flop in the US and still be profitable because it's done so well in China. So I don't think it's necessarily surprising, although
but Barbie as a brand is all. We've talked about this with you on the show before, haven't we? They launched a Barbie scoliosis doll. I remember discussing with you. Yeah, Barbie is an inclusive brand, right? It's all about positivity. That's the whole point. Is it worth risking Barbie on it? It just doesn't seem likely to me.
I mean, I think it's probably a calculated risk, and as we were saying, like the amount that of news it's going to generate and the financial income is probably going to be fairly minimal and short-lived compared to, I mean, I saw this article and then I saw probably 5 to 10 articles about Margot Robbie's outfits on the marketing tour, her new two-tone nails. Like, it's generated news, but it's going to be fairly short-lived, I think.
I feel this is the point to say, Abdul, that you're sitting on a Barbie pink gamer chair to record this podcast.
I am indeed, and I have pink earphones as well. But yeah, we're excited. I think we're going to watch it, and I'll be looking for that scene and rub it in the face of my Vietnamese students.
Well, yes, you can tell us later whether there's a cheer that goes up in the cinema in Hong Kong or not during that scene. I mean, Emma, you brought us this story. It is going to be a talked about movie, this, isn't it? But what's interesting about it is I think people still don't know whether it's going to be a hit or not. My sense is that it is because it's being talked about, but it feels like there's a risk.
Yeah, I mean, I can't remember sort of pre-release hype for a film like this in a long, long time. I mean, last year we discussed Top Gun Maverick on the podcast and sort of about the, the hype around that and, how it was, basically the box office was effectively saving American cinema post-COVID. But that was sort of after the film was released, and then word of mouth sort of went around. It was like, oh, this is such a good film, you have to see it in the cinema. For Barbie, it's been so sort of like in advance. As you say, people haven't actually seen the film yet. But A, because it's one of the biggest brand names in the world, everyone's heard of Barbie. And also the film, while the trailer, this trailer with 9-line, I'll put that in quotation marks for you, Ollie, has caused controversy, the marketing has been remarkable. I mean, there was the first trailer when it came out, which was sort of a parody of 2001, A Space Odyssey, I think sort of set people thinking, oh, they're doing something very unusual, unexpected with Barbie here. The trailer's got millions upon millions of hits. Barbie core has been trending on TikTok for however many months. It's, the hype surrounding this has been incredible, has been remarkable. And I think that simply, even if the film itself doesn't turn out to be anything special, I think it is going to be a hit financially because people have got so hyped up to see it. I'd be amazed if it's not got the biggest opening weekend gross of any film this year simply because of the pre-release hype around it.
With which it is sadly time to wrap the show this week. What? I'm having so much fun. Well, Barbie, we're just getting started. Oh, I love you, Ken, etc. My thanks to Julia, Abdul, and Emma. You can follow this show for free and get every episode as soon as it's released. Just search for The Week Unwrapped wherever you get your podcasts and tap follow. You can also get 6 free issues of The Week magazine with a trial subscription when you go to theweek.co.uk/subscribe. In the meantime, I've been Olly Mann. Our music is by Tom Morby, the producers Sophie King and Harriet Wells at Rethink Audio. And until we meet again to unwrap next week, bye-bye.